Today we have heard a lot about the impact of Bible translations and its positive meaning, but every historical process might be quite controversial in the close look, and I would like to offer you to look at the Bible translation process of the 16th century from a bit different angle. So, when a single word matters, the role of Bible translations in the witch hunt in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Translations of the Bible, despite their scrupulosity and high qualification of the translators and publishers, always became a kind of interpretation or even recreation that penetrated contemporary ideas and views of the translator's milieu and transferred them to wider public circles and even to the next generations. The reason was in the tricky features of transmission of meanings of the complicated ancient text by the means of the contemporary notions and terms that inevitably led to modernization and new senses, especially among non-experts. In circumstances when translated Holy Scripture was commonly used for everyday secular practice in legislation, politics, education, etc., the way even a single word was translated could have really serious consequences. In particular, early modern witch hunt phenomenon demonstrates brightly this powerful impact. So, existing witchcraft beliefs influenced the 16th century Bible translations, and in their turn, translated Bible provisions, now accessible for every reader, were applied in the witch persecution. Among factors that made early modern European witch hunt such a large-scale, unique phenomenon, researchers of witchcraft usually point out the importance of the perception of biblical magicians as witches. The Bible, the most fundamental text for Europeans, contains numerous condemnations of different magic practices. The most influential one was the Exodus verse, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." All English quotations in my presentation will be according to King James Bible, and those of you who can read Slavic languages, you can see even differences of meanings between these translations. There were several variants of translation of the unclear Hebrew word mechashefa. I hope it is correct, sounds like that. Depending on the way of understanding in particular historical and cultural context. As you see, in different epochs and different translations, it might translate it in different way. But in the epoch of Bible translations of the 16th century, the word became a witch in the majority of European languages, bearing all the connotations of the new 16th century term with it. Some critics of witchcraft, like Johann Weyer or Reginald Scott, already in the 16th century, pointed out the misunderstanding as the false foundation of witchcraft theory, as well as the irrelevance of the Old Testament legislation for contemporary Christians. But such voices were mostly ignored, and Bible translations supported readers in thoughts that their hatred and suspicions towards supposed witches were legitimate and godly. No wonder that preachers and jurists all over Europe, including the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, used such prescriptions to legitimize witch persecution. The first attempt to create a popular and accessible Bible for the Grand Duchy of Lithuania was a Ruthenian Slavonic adaptation made and published by Francisca Skaryna in 1517-1519 in Prague. Skaryna's work, based on traditional Czech Slavonic texts, as well as on Latin Vulgate and Bohemian Venice Bible of 1506. No wonder that notorious Exodus passage, as you see, sounded closer to Western tradition. Чародейников не будете живите. So don't let sorcerers live. It was almost literal borrowing from Czech translation included into the text generally following Czech Slavonic one. Why did Skaryna decide to replace the term volhv of Czech Slavonic tradition by čarodějníky, according to the Czech text? Both of the words exist in Czech Slavonic text in Rus, but more popular volhv was first of all a translation of a very general Greek term magos, magician, as well as pagan priest or occultist, while charovanie referred to Greek goetia, which meant sorcery, especially maleficent one. Perhaps this word or its cognates were used in this meaning in spoken Ruthenian or Belarusian of this time as well. European intellectual trends of the time condemned and persecuted witches, but tolerated literary magic and occult sciences, popular among humanists and educated elite of Europe. In the context of that difference, a maleficent sorcerer from Czech translation seems to Skaryna more appropriate than old Slavonic magician. Remarkable that in compared to majority of Western translations, čarodějník is male, not female, as a typical Western witch of the time. Thus, Skaryna's edition was the first attempt of the limited introduction of contemporary anti-witchcraft meaning in East Slavic biblical tradition. The term čarodějník is unknown in trial documents, but its cognates like čarodějání, čarodejstvo were pretty common for Ruthenian witch trial materials of the 16th, 17th centuries, in particular in the earliest witchcraft case of the Grand Duchy in Lithuania, which held in Vitebsk in 1532. Skaryna supposed his additions to the Ruthenian Orthodox and maybe Catholic believers in Poland, Lithuania, and perhaps for Muscovy. Church hierarchs condemned the translation, blaming it for Hussitic or Lutheran heresy, but for several decades it became quite popular, at least for home reading, exactly on the eve and at the beginning of the witch hunt epoch in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. But generally, this edition seems to be more a reflection of translators' ideas than a significant opinion-shaping tool. But the main version of the Bible for Ruthenian Orthodox was Ostrog Bible, published in 1581 in Ostrog in modern Ukraine. It was the first full canonic edition until the middle of the 18th century. The edition was in Czech Slavonic, mostly following traditional manuscripts of Bulgarian translation of the 9th century. The provision under consideration sounded: magicians, volhvs shouldn't live. Volhv да не живет. But the term volhv was changing its meaning. It was no more a universal notion. In Czech Slavonic vocabulary lexis, issued by Laurenti Zizani in Vilna, 15 years later, the word volhv translated to Ruthenian as varozhbit, fortune teller. Furthermore, in the same translation of New Testament in Ostrog, this word was neutral or even positive. 3 volhvs, 3 magi, or kings in Western tradition, visited the infant Jesus on the night of his birth. In different texts of the 17th, 18th centuries in Czech Slavonic and Ruthenian, volhv means a person that possesses the occult knowledge, often in historic or exotic context, rather distinguished from sorcerer or witch of local nation. The only mentioning of similar term volhvit in trial documents was in Polotsk case of 1643, and this volhvit was a kind of witch doctor who tried to heal a victim of bewitchment. Perhaps because of this outdated term, the notorious Exodus phrase was not so fatal in the Slavic Orthodox context. Reformation as well as Counter-Reformation missionary activity brought a great demand to cheap and understandable Bible. Because of forming common Polish language noble culture, Polish translations became popular. Furthermore, part of them were created in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Protestant Bible editions like Beresti Bible, Nesvizh Bible, Gdansk Bible followed Western European trends, mentioning female witch, charovnitsa, exactly the same term as in contemporary witch trials. Catholic versions, a Bible of Leopolita, Bible of Wujek, referred to male witch. But the Bible of Wujek, which was an official translation for Polish Church till the 20th century, included female witch, charovnitsa, as you see, two reference on the margins. Because male, it was due to Latin Vulgate, and female, as you remember, it was closer to Hebrew text, and of course closer to contemporary witch ideas of the time. The second half of the 16th century, the time of publishing of those translations, was a period of the rapid deployment of a witch hunt in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, while Poland has already had half of a century of witch trial experience. Not only Western examples, but the own experience as well persuaded how to translate the provisions under consideration. These editions were widely read by the Lithuanian elite, shaping the worldview of judges and accusers. The Bible anti-witch provisions were not only a tool of shaping a believer's worldview, but sometimes they were used in trials as legal prescriptions, as so-called the law of God. Existent small and fragmented corpus of survived and studied trial materials contains only a few of such cases. The most bright one is a case of Raina Hramychina that occurred in 1631. A year before, in Slonim, a supposed witch Hanna Korotkaya, during interrogation, blamed a village priest's wife Raina Hramychina in witchcraft and bewitchment of Lithuanian Marshal Jan Stanislav Sapieha. Sapieha brought Raina Hramychina to trial. Because of her noble origin and highly professional defense by her attorney, the trial was long, for several months, and complicated. That's why we can see a broad range of legal and worldview details. To prove Raina was a witch, the plaintiff's attorney pointed out testimonies about her suspicious folk midwife and medicine practices, while the defender tried to persuade judges that such practices were popular among women and they applied natural, not demonic forces. The plaintiff's attorney referred to the Bible provisions, they were quoted in the trial, that prescribed to sentence a sorcerer just for practicing any magic. The quotations seem to be from Protestant Brest Bible of the 1563. You see, quite old edition. The underlined terms for different kinds of sorcerers in the quoted verses are totally the same as in Hramychina's trial documents or other contemporary documents from trials. Charovnik, Guselnik, Charnoksiężnik. It seemed to be persuasive to the judges, alongside to other evidences and perhaps to Marshal Sapieha's pressure especially. And in final court decree, the law of God was mentioned alongside to Lithuanian statute and German imperial law as the base of the sentence. The statute allowed an application to other Christian laws in case of the incompleteness of Lithuanian law, and witch trials were usually among such cases. The majority of witch cases were ordinary criminal trials, while application of the Holy Scripture as the supreme law made the case not only a private harm investigation, but a struggle against universal evil. The final court decree stated the supreme reason of punishment of the witch to prevent propagation of the harmful and hidden evil among people and to restrain and inhibit others from such an ungodliness and sorcery by the example of this case or of the punishment of the priest wife. So let me conclude this brief overview. As we could see, the Orthodox conservative editions of traditional Czech Slavonic Bible transferred the old medieval pre-witch hunt vision of the magic issue. The exception was Franziska Skaryna's attempt of the text modernization that felt the influence of the new witchcraft ideas. But since the second half of the 16th century, Lithuanian educated circles have got various Polish editions that were a part of a pan-European translating trend, including mentioned witch-related features. Thus, Western witchcraft ideas penetrated the 16th century Bible translations, especially Catholic and Protestant versions, and in their turn, translated Bible provisions were applied in the witch persecution as a worldview shaping and legal tool. However, after the cease of witch hunt, mentioned prescriptions were reconsidered as well. Bible translations were a powerful ideological and practical tool of the time, and the research of translational and perceptional differences of Holy Scripture might bring new insights of understanding the intellectual history of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Thank you for attention.